Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 333. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the acclaimed and celebrated comic book writer and artist, Dave Baker.
Thank you for having me, Barney. Thank you.
You're welcome. Look at that. See, episode 333. See, look at that. That's a good number, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, especially because the total of that is 9, and there's the nine factors into Mary Tyler Morhawk pretty prominently. There's 9 chapters, 9 episodes of the show, 9 panel grids. The whole numerology of the book is around 9s. It's the 9th printing. Yeah, all of it. So it works well.
Because this book, as we talk about, Mary Tyler Moorhawk, came originally published in 2022, correct?
It was finished and published. It was finished in 2022. It's coming out now.
Okay.
But there's been some exciting times where maybe there's some forces in the present that have been burning all of the copies at distributors. And so we've gone through 8 other printings. This is the 9th printing. Who knows? And this is definitely a real thing and not just like a kayfabe bit I'm doing, because in the indicia it says 9th printing, which factors into the 9th printing army at the end of the book. It's totally not kayfabe. It's absolutely real.
You were on, as we did, like last time you were on, it was episode 92 or 95. For those that are interested in learning more about Dave Baker, please go ahead and check out that previous episode that we had on. But here we really want to talk about Mary Tyler Moorhawk. First of all, amazing name.
Thank you.
Second, tell people a little bit about what the graphic novel is, and it is over 130 pages long. This is, Dave, you're never the one to shy away from small stories.
Yeah, and you're looking at it in spreads, so it's actually 270 pages.
That's right.
Huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So the book is titled Mary Tyler Moorhawk, and it is split into 2 halves. Half of it is a comic book that is kind of a retro-futurist Jonny Questian, Nancy Drew archetype group of characters who are a part of a conglomerate of super scientists attempting to stop the end of the world from happening, the titular protagonist being Mary Tyler Moorhawk. And then the other half of the book is an epistolary novel told in the form of zines from issues of a magazine 100 years in the future called Physicalist Today, that exists in a timeline where physical objects have been outlawed, and people who collect comics and cultural ephemera have gone underground, and they're referred to as physicalists. And so they buy old magazines and comics and toys and things in these underground basement motel shows. And we follow a journalist 100 years in the future who's named Dave Baker, who's obsessed with this comic and eventual adaptation into a TV show called Mary Tyler Moorhawk. The show only lasted for 9 episodes, and so Dave Baker becomes obsessed with figuring out who created the show and why did it get canceled. Eventually, he finds out that the person who created the show was also named Dave Baker, and it sets him off on this weird metatextual journey where he questions his sense of self and his relationship to the media that he consumes, and eventually he tries to track down this reclusive artist that shares his same name.
So where did the inspiration of this come from?
The book kind of started because the idea is I wanted to do something that was reverential to the things that I loved as a younger person: Tintin, Hergé, Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, Stratemeyer Syndicate, and that kind of like the things that I'm nostalgic for from my youth, specifically Jonny Quest. And then as I started making it, I started thinking about how that relates to the world now, and how a lot of these archetypes have kind of fallen into disrepair, and people don't necessarily interact with them in the same way, to the degree that a lot of the parodies of these archetypes are the things that have now supplanted the archetypes in our cultural consciousness, i.e. the Venture Brothers, right? Like most people know, teen detectives. they're aware of the Hardy Boys, despite there being a currently airing, Canadian produced Hardy Boys show on Hulu, and also a CW TV show for Nancy Drew, and a mid-budget movie for Nancy Drew like 2 years ago. But they haven't caught on culturally in the same way, whereas the parodies of these things, or the echoes or facsimiles of these ideas have. And that kind of sent me down a wormhole of thinking about, well, what does it mean to be a fan? What does it mean to be consumed by nostalgia? Is that a positive thing? Is that a negative thing? How has the world been shaped by the kind of cultural drift in the meaning of the word nostalgia? Because it used to be nostalgia was just a term that described a wistful feeling of something in your past that you could never reclaim, as in going home, or going home again, or the mom's apple pie. You can just never have that again, whatever. And it was a wistful, borderline negative thing. But now the meaning of nostalgia has pivoted so much to be closer to, it's something I'm familiar with. It's a warm feeling. It's a positive experience for me. And it's something that's safe. I have predetermined expectations of safety when I enter into a contract with this piece of media. And the fact that everything that gets made now is rooted, including my thing, in some form of nostalgia, can't be a positive thing, right? Like, what is the cultural monkey's paw that we're doing in order to make these billions of dollars off the Avengers movies for Disney? What is that a positive thing that we're recycling stories from the 1960s? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe they're modern day myths. Maybe everybody just needs a moral compass instilled in them, and from the altar of Jack Kirby. Or maybe it's that these corporations that control everything know that they've been play testing these ideas for 50 years, and they can more or less guarantee that they'll attract a certain number of people, which will return on their investment. And so a lot of those ideas and themes kind of echo throughout both sides of the narrative, and it kind of informs itself as it waxes and wanes, and hopefully goes in some unexpected directions, maybe, or not. Maybe it's very expected, and you're going to be like, this was a waste of time, buddy boy. And I'll say, my bad.
Your name's Dave Baker. You have a character called Dave Baker in here. Is this something where you've actually used this as some level of nostalgic journey for you, or is this some sort of inner reflection that you wanted to explore for yourself, and through a lens of almost like a autobiography?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, the character of Dave Baker, the journalist, is a very separate and distinct person. He does not have my biography at all. But also part of that is, whenever I'm at conventions, I meet 2 or 3 people named Dave Baker. It's a very common Anglo-Saxon last name and a biblical first name. It's like John Smith, And there's actually even here in Los Angeles, there's another guy named Dave Baker that goes to conventions, and like he sells like pins, and like he's an artist. And there's another guy named Dave Baker who's a lawyer in Los Angeles. And then there's another guy in LA who works at Chipotle. He's who works in the corporate branch of Chipotle, and he comes and buys comics from me and gives me Chipotle gift cards. He's a super sweet guy. And so the experience of running into all of these people with the same name and yet very disparate lived experiences, and yet also not that different, because we're all united in some way by fandom and the arts, really got me thinking and kind of questioning, what does it mean to share a name with someone? Does it provide an existential kind of guide path for your life? Are you working in similar rhythms? Do you love similar people? Are you fans of similar things? Is your home life the same? What does this mean? And so over the course of ruminating on all that stuff, I spent 3 years writing a novel. Trying to sort it all out. Because to be clear, the old man in this version of reality is me. The old creator is me. The young person, the journalist, is not me. But also, I think that all art is autobiography. So there's a case to be made that, by bisecting my personality into the fan and the creator, there's a dialogue that's happening there, and a push and pull. And what is the level of responsibility for equitable compensation that each one of these two halves of the commerce cycle of creating art. What is their responsibility in that tug of war, and where do the corporate entities that control the means of production fit? All of those themes are kind of throughout the whole book in the future stuff, in the physicalist today segments, whereas all the comic stuff has similar themes, but it's couched more in genre. It's couched more in hyper dense, reverential comic book iconography and language, both visually and, you know, there's lots of footnotes where they're kind of harkening back to like 60s Marvel style editorial notes, giving you all this explanation and world building and really trying to suck you in and give you a really rich textured experience. Um, and that's these are the simple answer of like what was the inspiration for this is I wanted to make something that if I found it out in the wild, I would be like, what is this? I was trying to make something really for me as the audience. And ironically, I ended up putting myself in it as the literal audience. But, I that wasn't the initial plan. I think my problem necessarily, or my compulsion, is just like I can't ever say no to myself. So I'm always like, wouldn't it be funny if? And then I spend 6 months doing whatever that idea was.
But your art style as well is very reminiscent of was it Mobius?
I lived in France for a while, from January to April. I was in France and England last year, and I went to Mobius's grave. I went to the Hergé Museum in Belgium, the Comics Museum in Angoulême, France, and I went to the festival there. And it was really quite an experience living there and really kind of observing how they absorb comics. They refer to bande dessinée and comics and manga as the ninth art, meaning that it is as important as film and TV and the novels, the mediums that we all associate with as mass cultural movers and shakers, music. And that to me also was one of the 7,000 pieces of weird numerology in the book, that there is. There's 9, they refer to it as the ninth art, and there's 9 panel grids throughout the whole book. There's 9 chapters. The TV show lasted 9 episodes.
Talk to us a little bit about your process. Did you have this all together and then decided at the end, I'm going with a pink hue, or it was always going to be this color as you put it together?
Yeah, it was always going to be this, primarily so that I didn't have to do full color, because I colored it all myself.
Wow.
Everyone is Tulip. It was written by me, illustrated by Nicole Gu, and colored by Ellie Hall, or co-colored by Ellie Hall and Nicole, and they both did like amazing jobs on the colors. And I don't have that skill or the time. Like I already spent so much time writing this. This is ostensibly 2 books, right? It's a fully fledged novel, and then it's a fully fledged graphic novel shoved together and melded and warped and soldered, right? And the process of doing that was very physically taxing for multiple reasons. One, I retaught myself how to draw. I had injured my hand drawing my last book, and I basically had to make changes. I was like, okay, so I can't keep working this way. It's breaking my hand. So I can't ink. So I have to draw in pencil. So how can I just draw in pencil and make it economical and speedy enough to finish a book? So I developed a methodology where I would draw my construction lines in red architectural pencil, and then the finished lines that you're seeing are all in just a mechanical pencil that I pull into Photoshop and pull out the architectural drawing pencil lines, leaving just the kind of pristine, no construction line pencils, up the contrast, and then kind of solidify everything in Photoshop, coloring it digitally. But my hand was so messed up after having drawn the whole book, I colored it with my left hand. Quite an experience, for sure.
So how long did this 250 plus page book take you?
Probably about 5 years ish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, from beginning to end. Yeah, and that's also because I wasn't working on it. I was working on it more or less the whole time, but it wasn't every day. Because like while I was working on this, I also wrote Tulip, and I wrote Forest Hills Bootleg Society, Nicole and I's Simon & Schuster book. I wrote another book that Nicole is currently drawing that we're putting out. I wrote some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics, and I drew some stuff. So there was other things happening while I was doing it.
Right.
But this was the lion's share of whenever I wasn't working on something for somebody else to draw, this is what I was drawing.
And you said, so this book is, as of this recording, this isn't available yet for purchase.
Yeah, it is available February 13 or February 14 in comic book stores everywhere. Yeah.
So you approach them, or do they approach you and say, hey, do you got something that you're working on that we might be able
Barney,
to...
dude, I pitched this thing everywhere, dude. Like I I showed it to everybody. And I had some really interesting conversations with people and some conversations that I wasn't so excited about, where I was just like, yeah, I don't think this is a great fit. And ultimately I sent it to Chris Staros, and man, I think it takes a specific person to see this weird hybrid novel, graphic novel thing and be like, oh, this doesn't easily fit into a bucket. Let's publish it. Most
Right.
people want, like, what are the comps? What are the things that are like this that have proven that things have sold like this?
Right.
And he saw it, and he asked me to get on Zoom. We got on Zoom, and he asked me two questions. He was just like, is Mary Tyler Moore in this book? And I was like, nope. And he was like, and the ears that she's got, are those, like, is Mickey Mouse involved in any way? And I was like, nope, has nothing to do with Mickey Mouse. I mean, other than being like a stylistic homage, like it's not a
Right.
thing at all. It's more just supposed to represent innocence, because circles are, we're
Right.
predetermined to be attracted to circles because they look like our young. And he was like, oh, all right, yeah, let's do it. And I just think the world of him, man. I think the world of him, that he could see this in a void of other people's reactions and think, I think there's something here, I mean, obviously I think it's cool, but like, I made it, you know what I mean? Like, I'm biased, I spent 5 years making it. I'm very biased. Whereas
Right.
it's very easy to say, I'm not sure this will work, And he
Right.
didn't do that. In fact, he said the opposite. He was like, I really think this could be something. I don't know what, but I think it could. And I just feel so indebted and so honored to have the Top Shelf brand on the book. And last week or 2 weeks ago, the book got reviewed by Publishers Weekly, and they gave it a starred review. Which, if you don't know what a starred
Nice.
Publishers Weekly is, Publishers Weekly is an entity that exists in the book trade space, and they review very select number of projects. And when they do, basically like 20,000 books get submitted to Publishers Weekly. They review 500 a year, and then of those 500, they only give a small percentage what are called starred reviews,
Right.
which is basically their like marker that something is truly exceptional. And
Nice.
it got a starred review, and the last line of the review is so crazy, dude. The last line is like, this whirlwind of a graphic novel is sure to please fans of Philip K. Dick and David Foster Wallace. It's everything I could have wanted.
Right.
This is the part where I get hit by a train. Like, I'm not allowed to have a happy ending, Barney. Like, this is amazing. And the fact that, the reviewer, it's done blind, so you don't know who the reviewer is. But the fact that the reviewer did it and was so kind and really got what I was doing, but also that they specifically picked up on the David Foster Wallace thing is just like so cool to me, because that's exactly what he's a huge influence on me. I love his novels, and there are like multiple references to Infinite Jest and Broom of the System and The Pale King and all his books in my book, but then also specifically his essays, Consider the Lobster and A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, were very kind of instrumental for me in kind of like breaking the idea of how I was going to tell the novel stuff up and how I was going to
Right.
fragment everything. Because his essays use this footnote mechanic where you're constantly bouncing back and forth between a main body and a footnote that it provides some weird ancillary detail. when I read that, I was like, he doesn't know this, but he's making comics. Like the way he's using footnotes is like the space and the time it takes your eye to travel from the main body down to the footnote is the same thing that a comic does, where it has an image, a gutter, and an image. And I think I could play around with that. This being a perfect example, right? You have a giant double page spread of a bunch of cast members with all of
Right.
these asterisks and footnotes, and then you turn the page, and then there's biographies on all these characters and who they are and what their
No,
relationship is to our main
that's
character. And so that's just one way that the footnotes play out in the book. Another way is the kind of classic 60s Silver Age way. And then in the prose sections, there's lots of footnotes that are very jokey and weird and kind of make you question the narrator and if he's being reliable. And like, yeah, that's something I was very interested in. I love formal experimentation and weird, you know, literary swings. If I I'm always down for somebody to be like, yeah, I got this weird idea. I'm just gonna see if this is cool. Is this cool? Most people are like, nah, that sucks. And I'm like, this is amazing. I love it.
As you're putting this together, did you come up with a story first, or did you come up with a character first?
I think I had the idea to do like a Jonny Quest style action adventure thing with a character called Mary Tyler Morhawk, but
Mm.
she was a part of another thing. I had an idea to do a book that was like a collection of screenplays and like basically like a behind the scenes book of a TV show that never happened.
Mhm.
And one of the episodes was this fake TV show, Mary Tyler Morhawk, that was adapted from some comics. And I started making a mini comic about Mary Tyler Morhawk to use as a prop in that short story thing. And then I just kind of fell in love with the character, and I was like, oh, this is so much more fun. And I kind of abandoned that other project and was just like, oh no, it's this. This is what it is. And that's kind of how I feel. It's one thing when you're dealing with a larger publishing entity. Like when I worked with Simon & Schuster with Nicole for our book Forest Hills, I had to submit an outline. We gave them a chunk of the script. There was pages. There was a fully written script, and then we had deliverables, and everything was very production oriented. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Right.
And that's great. It totally makes sense. I can work that way, but I find that when I'm on my own, left to my own devices, doing more kind of a painterly approach where you're just kind of sculpting and figuring things out, and oh, maybe it's this, or oh, maybe it's that, or maybe it's over here, yields more experimental and exciting work. And frankly, I think the downside of that is that you can end up lost in a world of your own making, where you're just like, what am I doing? Is this book ever going to be finished? Like, who is this book even for? And then you also find things that you would not have found otherwise.
Right. Well, then that's a good point then, Dave. Who is this book for then?
Dude, frankly, apparently it's for me, the goal was to make something that was literary. There are literary comics, 100%, but there aren't as many of them as I would like. I wish that we had our Infinite Jest, our House of Leaves, our raw shark texts, experimental, weird, avant-garde literary books that connect with people in a strange way and maybe bring people into comics that wouldn't have even thought about it before. Sean Tan is another person that comes to mind of somebody who does writing and drawing in unconventional ways.
Right.
And I really wanted to make something that I wasn't sure who the audience was. I just knew I thought it was cool, and if I'm a weirdo, there's got to be other weirdos out there. So let's try and find some weirdos. Let's see where this can go. And we're talking before the book is out, but frankly, today it had a review on thebeat.com, and the review is amazing. Like the review's crazy. The last line of the review, I've got it here, is Mary Tyler Moorhawk is a dense, fascinating work. It's a graphic novel that will require several reads, and while on occasion it can feel too on the nose or too indebted to its influences, there's an important critique here worthy of considering. It stands out as an experimental and worthwhile evolution in Baker's style and will surely be looked back on as one of his best works. What? What? I think to me it's just unbelievable that it's not getting just like a shrug of indifference from people. You know, like it's just so crazy to me that it is positively critically received. I mean, I'm sure that once the book is out in the wild, there's going to be people that are like, this is hard. I don't want to read a novel, you know, like, which is fine. Totally. That's honestly, that's what I've been expecting this whole time, is just for people to be like, I don't really get it. And then in 10 years for it to kind of come back in some way, and somebody at a convention one time might be like, you know, I found that book and it was really intense. Like, yeah, I wasn't expecting that experience, but man, that was a wild time. But the fact it's working is crazy.
Do you have the drive and the curiosity to revisit that world that you created?
I don't know. Initially, I was like, yeah, let's do another one. And now I kind of feel like, I don't know. I think that there's ways of revisiting kind of thematic similarities without literally doing another book about her. But I also, conversely, a bunch of the characters from this book show up in my other book, Halloween Boy.
Okay.
She has not shown up yet, but I wouldn't write that off. I could see myself using her, but it would just be a different thing as like just the comic book stuff, you know, like, because I like her as a character, but I think this piece with the two, I think it's kind of a two-hander, you know, to borrow a film term, where it's that push and pull of the two data sets of this strange, you know, future version of society, and also this weird action adventure comic that's played completely earnestly.
Let's talk. So what's next for you then?
That's a good question, man. So I'm currently, you know, self-publishing Halloween Boy. I've made 5 issues of it. They're all oversized. The last 2 are triple sized. They're each 60 pages long because, you know, why would I do something easy? And I'm playing around with, maybe I'll do some more Halloween Boy stuff. I haven't really decided on that. For the past month, I've just been doing tons of this, you know, promo tour stuff, lots of interviews, lots of podcasts, all that goodness. And then I've got a couple unannounced projects, and you know, it's the hustle, right? You're always working on 5 things. It's a question of which of those things actually ends up manifesting first.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. Like you said, this is something I've been working on. It's almost, it feels like as though you just like took a piece of yourself and put it out there, and it seems as though compared to your other projects, this is the one that has like most of you in it now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that I don't mean this in a way that diminishes any of the other things, because I'm very proud of the work that I've done, especially the work with Nicole. I think it's I just think of it as a separate thing, right? Like, Nicole writes and draws stuff for herself. I write and draw stuff for myself, but the stuff we do together, to me, that's almost like the super group, you know? That's like the, you know, the velvet underground of what we do, where it's everybody coming together. It's the Beatles or whatever, where when we're on our own, like, this is my weirdo. I don't like the Beatles enough to be able to know George Harrison's solo stuff, I guess. I don't know. Whichever of them is the weirdest. I don't know. You know, but Brian Eno. I'll go with Brian Eno. This is my Brian Eno, like, ambient soundtrack thing, where you're just like, no one's gonna listen to this. And then now ambient is like a huge genre that's like, you know, it played everywhere and people love it. And yeah, I think that there is something, I would say it's the most literally autobiographical, where it's very much about the things I care about: the history of comics, the history of culture, the waxing and waning of the levers of power, the separation of the worker from the means of production, the gangster history of American identity and how we have consistently been non-empathetic to the creative class, the way characters are stripped away from their creators, even now. Like all of those themes are things that I am obsessed with, and they manifest in the books in different ways, where in this one it's quite literally that. Like the one of the footnotes, like the first footnote, is just a history lesson on the various eras, of the Silver Age, Golden Age, Bronze Age, the Dark Age of comics. Like it's very like that review said, sometimes it's a little on the nose, but frankly, we live in an era where subtlety is dead, man. Subtlety is just, whether it succeeds is a separate conversation, but I wanted to make something that attempted to be literary, that attempted to push the medium in a new direction, that attempted to aspire to the heights of what we always talk about, how the medium's potential is limitless, which is true, but also on what scale, right? Because how many times does a publisher on a mainstream level take a big artsy swing? Frankly, pretty rarely. It's usually steeped in genre because that's commercially viable 9 times out of 10. And I was really hoping that I could find somebody to partner with that would believe that I was doing that thing on a successful scale, which is exactly what Chris Staros saw in the book. And frankly, if it wasn't for the design work of Mike Lopez and the photography of David Catalano, I don't know. I don't know if it would have succeeded. I think it's a combination of their design aesthetic, the photography, the prose and ideas that I had, the humor that I bring to it, and then also the comics as this weird soup of ambition that, even if it's not really your thing, you could still look at it and be like, well, that guy's trying. Like he's trying.
It's good, man. I love it. So, well, thank you so much, Dave, for coming on. I look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. It was a pleasure.
Let me fix out my thing. I gotta get my comic book background now since we're talking comics. There we go. All right. See? I just changed. I just switched rooms just like that. See?
Yeah, just like that. Love it. Dune. What else is in there? A little Nemesis. A little
Nemesis.
Yeah.
Center.
Midnight Club. Yeah.